Hey, it's Nikki. Burlington Buzz covers the everyday life of our town, the people, the places, the things that make Burlington, Burlington. We don't usually talk about national politics, but the 6th Congressional District seat is open this year, and we thought you deserved a chance to hear directly from the people asking for your vote. This is one of a collection of conversations with the candidates running to represent Burlington in Congress. We hope you'll take the time to listen to all 7 conversations. Check the show notes for links to connect with each candidate directly. Now let's get to it. Hello. Welcome back to Burlington Buzz on the mic. This is Nikki. I'm here with Tram Nguyen. Tram is running in the Democratic primary as one of 6 candidates for the 6th Congressional District in Massachusetts. Welcome, Tram.
Thanks so much for the opportunity for me to introduce myself to your listeners, and I'm really excited for this conversation.
Great, me too. So why don't you go ahead and take the opportunity? Who are you? Tell us all about you.
So I'm thrilled to be running for Congress. I am running because our federal government has failed us, and it is time for us to have a progressive champion who has a record of fighting and winning for this district. I've been the state representative for the last 8 years since beating a MAGA Republican back in 2018. I have worked with our community members and our community leaders to pass good legislation to represent the people. And now I'm looking to bring this work to the federal level. As much as we've been able to do at the state level and the local level, we need real partners at the federal level to achieve so many of the goals that we have, whether that is affordable housing or healthcare, childcare, bringing down costs for utilities and food, or even investing in our education, climate change or infrastructure. All of these things can't be done alone without federal investment. And especially in this moment when we feel as though it's not just a disinvestment, but an active obstacles, if you will, for so many of these things that we're looking to do here. I am very thrilled that I'm the only legislator in this race with that track record of passing legislation. I've passed over 13 bipartisan bills. I brought back over $500 million to my current district, and we need that sort of advocate and fighter and champion going to the federal level to be able to do the same. But not to mention, I came in right before the COVID pandemic, so we know what it's like to be there for the people, to meet them where they're at. And I would argue that we're in another crisis right now when people are struggling to put food on the table. And as the only immigrant from a working class family in this race, I'm not just theorizing about how bills or policy impact people on the ground. I grew up in public housing. I grew up, we came to this country with literally $100 to our name. Wow. My dad had served with the Americans during the Vietnam War and was a political prisoner for 8 years. Wow. So we lived in abject poverty until we came to the U.S. when I was 5, to right here in Massachusetts, to Lawrence, not too far from here. And I know what it's like to see my parents struggle. My dad was delivering pizza and Chinese food and doing whatever he could to provide for us. And that's the struggle that people are facing right now. And I think people want someone who understands what they're going through, who'd be willing to meet them where they're at and actually deliver and get real results for people. But at the same time, to also fight to save our democracy. That's what we're hearing across the board. And as someone who literally moved across the world to the U.S. for democracy and freedom and opportunity, we still believe in that America, right? I would argue, especially now with the recent 250th birthday of America, I've been thinking about this a lot, about what that means to have this new country with that new American dream. And I'm living proof of that, of what happens when investments are made in someone like me, I came here not knowing a word of English at 5 years old, and became the first Vietnamese American to get elected into the Massachusetts House, and now running for Congress. That is just something my parents could never have even dreamed of. And here we are because of that investment. And I want to keep that American dream alive for folks. And when we talk about saving our democracy, it's like free and fair elections. It's sad that there are people asking me, will we have an election coming up? And that's something that was probably unimaginable years back, right? And what we're seeing too is that people feel like elected officials are detached from them, and I don't blame them. We continue to elect multimillionaires and execs and people who are well-resourced into Congress, and we elect DC insiders and people playing by the same playbook. That's not working for any of us, and we wonder why there are no changes.
Right.
So what we're hearing from folks is they want new voices, fresh perspectives, people who come from diverse backgrounds, who have the lived experience that can relate to the people they serve and be able to be there and help people believe in our rule of law and our institutions again. And that's what I'm looking to do.
Wonderful. So you have a voting record. You just talked about you've helped pass legislation, bipartisan legislation. Is there one that you would say is really, people in Burlington would have recognized the impact from that?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, I came in right before the COVID pandemic. I got elected in 2019. COVID happened in 2020. It is very rare for legislators to get bills done in the first session, never mind the first year. And for me, in my first session, we were able to pass 3 bills related to unemployment. Okay. You remember during COVID, the unemployment system completely imploded because thousands and thousands of people had to get access to that. Yeah. And as someone, I've been in public service my entire career. I worked at Greater Boston Legal Services prior to getting elected. Right. And Burlington's actually in our service area.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
And so I did that work. I did a lot of work with low-wage workers, survivors of domestic violence, veterans, immigrants, et cetera. And in doing that work, I have done a lot of work in the unemployment system, but also just helping people to navigate difficult barriers, if you will, to access benefits. And so during that time, I worked with my colleagues to pass bills to expand access for thousands and thousands of people. And that not only helped them to pay for their basic necessities, but also it ensures that we got federal money that we otherwise would have lost, because part of unemployment is half, not half, but part state, part federal. So if people don't have access to unemployment, we're losing out on thousands and thousands of dollars from the federal level. And so that was really a lot of the work that we were doing during COVID, is to make sure that people get access to the benefits and resources that they need to provide for their own families, but also to serve as that the advocates I know myself to be. Part of Greater Boston Legal Services is I learned how to meet people where they're at, to talk to them about the struggles that they are going through, and figuring out how policies could work for people, how government could be a source of good, and how government should not be obstacles.
Rather than a barrier.
Yes.
What a world.
What a world. How innovative, if you will.
Yeah. So, thinking about the conversations that are happening in Washington, they don't always match the conversations that are happening locally, at our select board, at our dinner table, in our community conversations. What do you think is something that Washington is sort of overlooking when it comes to communities like ours, and what would you do to sort of address that?
I think that this is exactly why people are looking for someone who has that lived experience, to actually understand how difficult it is for people to live their daily lives, right? So when we're talking about, let's say, for example, healthcare, we need people who actually understands how the cost is really impacting people on the ground, that they're choosing between putting food on the table and accessing healthcare and medication and all the other necessities. Yeah. And I know that intimately because my mom, who is retired on a fixed income of $1,000 per month, her health insurance went up to $235 this past January because the subsidies were taken back by the federal government. So for her, that's almost 25%.
Right, it's a quarter of your income.
Yes, of her income. So luckily for her, I'm able to pay for her. But what about the thousands of people out there who don't have support like that, who have to decide, can I afford health insurance?
Yeah. Do I get my insulin, or do I have dinner every
Exactly.
night? Yeah.
And this is the problem, is that we have to talk about the cost of health insurance, the cost, lowering costs for a prescription, and just making sure that people feel like, again, government is working for them. That is not working for them. And when we're talking about, let's say, housing, As someone who grew up in public housing, I know intimately what that meant to have a roof over my head so I could learn. So I have that stability to then become the first in my family to go to college. And imagine my family, we came over in 1992. My parents worked multiple jobs, barely making minimum wage, but they were able to buy a home in 98.
Wow.
6 years later.
Wow.
That is unheard of right now.
No, you wouldn't be able to do that today.
And that's exactly it. So as much as we're able to do at the state level, we pass Affordable Homes Act, investing $7 billion into affordable housing, but that's not enough without federal investments. How are we going to get to the 220,000 units that we need here in Massachusetts by 2035, because we're about 40 years behind in production to even start to bring down costs if we don't have the federal support that we need. But not to mention tariffs are increasing the cost of construction, which then affects all of this. And, we're talking also about some of the conversations that needs to be had. This all intersects with immigration as well. We rely, a lot of our construction workers are foreign-born immigrants, and if they're afraid to show up for work, that also is a barrier that we need to address, right? So all of these issues intersect, and as someone who's been able to do a lot of this work at the federal level, I sometimes feel like my hands are tied because immigration is federal. There's not a lot that we can do at the state level. I mean, I'm hopeful that we'll still be able to pass the PROTECT Act, which would really help in some ways, but that's really the extent of what our state can do. We really do need federal investment in reimagining a whole new immigration system that's not instilling fear in our communities, not only immigrant communities, but our entire communities. Because I had a constituent reach out and said, my adopted daughter is trans and Asian American. She's afraid to leave the house because she's afraid she would get picked up by ICE. That breaks my heart.
Poor baby.
But these are the real things that we're hearing on the ground. And we have to have someone who is willing to roll up their sleeves and actually get to work to find ways forward.
Yeah. So you did mention housing, and that was kind of my next question here too. So the housing life cycle is broken. We sort of know that already. I don't have to rehash that in this conversation. But what do you think federally could be done? You could sort of started talking about that. So let's go a little bit deeper on how federal, as a congressperson, you would be able to support a Burlington family trying to buy a home right now.
Right. And so I was talking about the investment in the affordable housing supply. That is something very concrete. We need funding for that. But also investments in programs like first-time home buyer programs. That was what benefited my family when we first were able to buy that home. We need to make more of those investments, but also some of the work that we've been able to do at the state level in terms of expanding transit-oriented development and making sure that we are increasing low-income tax credit for deeply affordable housing units. That's drying up at the federal level, but also enforcing fair housing so that all families could have access to this assistance and resources so that they could be able, could have that opportunity to buy a home and find that stability. And also, like I said, as someone who grew up in public housing, we need to think about public housing, workforce housing, also different types of housing too. More starter homes. More permitting for that. I mean, some of that's at the local level, but partnership with the federal level in terms of tax incentives for that, so that older people can age in place. Some of them are saddled with huge houses. They can't really sell them if there's no option of where they can
Where
move
are they going to go?
And also I know some families, they want their kids and their grandkids to be able to move back home. And if they can't afford that, I know my parents, they have my two nieces, they would love to have them nearby, and they are nearby, luckily for them. But I know some families, they don't have that ability because their kids can't really move back home. And so these are all options and collaborations and partnerships that should be more, that should be stronger right now.
And that you would help
make sure
work
build
to
that
develop.
out. Exactly.
Yeah,
And I think that's also the benefit of being the only sitting legislator in this race, is that I understand that partnership with the local, state, and federal level.
Yeah.
And we've seen how that worked out, not only during COVID, but even more recently with so many of the other issues that are coming up, is that no level of government can really do this alone, right? We need to be rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
And I think this also speaks to how important it is for people to have someone who has the experience of building relationships and even being able to work across the aisle. We were just thinking about so many of these issues. We can't do it alone as Democrats either.
Right.
Even
right.
if we flip the House and Senate,
Yeah.
it will be by a couple of votes.
Yeah.
So how do we convince Republicans or even more conservative Democrats that these are common sense issues that we should be addressing,
Yeah.
that we could be addressing them together? Because I mean, whether it's housing or immigration, it impacts the people that they represent. It impacts their economy. It impacts whether or not they get reelected. So
Yeah.
we need to talk about.
We want to make it more intimate and immediate,
Yes,
right?
exactly. and that's very true.
Yeah.
If they are not delivering for the people the way that they should, then they may not get reelected. And that's what we need to remind some of these folks, that, people, it's still a government for the people and by the people.
Yeah.
Who are we representing? Regular
Yeah.
people. And
Right.
that's who we need to be paying attention to.
Absolutely. Talking about inflation and affordability, this is another, very, very common topic that people are talking about. I almost called it popular. I don't think it's popular to be talking about affordability, but, people are thinking about it because they're getting their grocery receipts and going, wow, that was 20% more than what it cost a year ago for the same amount of food. What is the sort of federal part of that story? What would you support as a congressperson to help ease that impact here locally?
Well, where some of the costs, the increase in costs are the result, again, relating back to immigration. We don't have enough farm workers, right? So some of those issues need to be addressed there, but also foreign wars are increasing the price of fossil fuel, et cetera.
Yeah.
This has to go back to investing in the people here, whether it's the 6th Congressional District, our Commonwealth, or our country. We have to allow people to be able to put food on the table. And I tell people across, all the different events that I've been speaking at, I've said this: if people can't put food on the table, they're not going to care about anything else, including our democracy, which is very concerning, because without our democracy, none of this would matter.
Right.
So this is why we have to address those issues, and how do we put more money back into people's pockets. And this is why it's important to have that advocate to go to the federal level to bring back money for all the different projects and make investments in our infrastructure so that it doesn't fall onto people locally having to pay and be responsible for everything. And that will help put money back into people's pockets. But at the end of the day, it's really about making sure that people even know what resources are available there. So it takes having a legislator who understands communication, that they are the liaison for the people with government agencies, departments, whatever you will. And that's the role of constituent services, to cut through red tape, to help people cut through red tape so that they get access to the resources that they need. And on the flip side of lowering costs, we need to protect workers. We need to pay people more. As someone who's done work as a labor and employment attorney, I know intimately how important it is. I'm also a union member as part of UAW, and it's very important for me that we continue to work on giving people access to paid family medical leave, increasing minimum wage. How is it that certain parts of the country, their minimum wage is still $7.50? We fought hard here in Massachusetts to increase the minimum wage to $15, and I have worked with my colleagues to try to bring this up even more so. I was the lead on a bill to increase minimum wage to $20.
Wow.
It's still pending, there are discussions, but my point is that workers need to be paid more, to be paid living wages, and have access to benefits to give them the stability that they need, especially right now when everything is so expensive. And it takes someone who actually knows how to build relationships and work with anyone who's willing to work with me to make sure that we move things forward. And I say this all the time. I am not one to compromise my values, but I'm willing to make compromises to actually get things done. That was how I was able to get the 13 bipartisan bills through. None of these bills look like how I first introduced them.
Right.
But it was because of conversations with people, especially people I disagree with.
Yes.
Because I've learned a lot from them.
Yeah.
I've incorporated their feedback into the bills to make them stronger. And that was how those bills were passed. And that's the type of negotiations that are needed to get things done. And just look at the recent housing bill. Finally, Congress got their act together. They passed this bill. It is the biggest investment in housing at the federal level. And our current president decided not to sign it unless we allow for voter ID, which would limit access to the ballot box. Outrageous to me. And I'm just so thrilled that Congress is now recognizing housing as a bipartisan issue, which is what we were talking about.
Right.
You know, they were able to come together, get this thing done.
Yeah.
And again, our executive branch should not be an obstacle in that.
Yeah, it strikes me, you know, in all of these conversations that I'm having, you're here as the 6th out of 7 candidates that I'm interviewing for this. And we really, I've been doing Burlington Buzz for 4.5 years. It's about wanting the best for your community, right? It doesn't we never say the D word or the R word on Burlington Buzz at all for any reason. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about national government or anything like that. And the reason is because it's so important for us to come together for the good of the community. And it's really, once you start talking ideologies, it just muddies the waters and it keeps things from getting done. And so I think just to emphasize the point that bipartisanship is the only way that we move forward, I think, as a society. I'm going to stop there because I don't usually get so pontificatey. Another, you mentioned labor, and another concern for employees or workers is AI and its potential to take jobs away from people who need them. Tell me, what would you support? What kind of policies would you support to help kind of the transition from no AI to it feels like AI everywhere?
Absolutely. Well, we have to just recognize AI is here.
Yeah.
Right? And as with all technologies, there needs to be safeguards. And I'm of the belief that AI should be used to enhance our work, not to replace our work. Because there are, especially for safety jobs and many other jobs, we need real people for oversight. Yeah. And we need oversight of AI anyway. But some of the regulations that we need to be to implement are privacy protections. AI should not be used to as surveillance against workers, especially I've heard of horror stories of AI being used to surveil people outside of work hours.
What?
That is not acceptable in any way, shape, or form. And in terms of just the usage of AI and the environmental impacts as well are things that we need to think about. I'm the chair of the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee in the State House right now, and I take every issue with a climate lens. And so how do we make sure that the profits that they are getting from AI are actually and are not then the cost be borne by regular people. And so how do we regulate that? How do we make sure that we put a pause on any new development of data centers, et cetera, until we're caught up with the technology? Because right now, frankly, we have multimillionaires and billionaires of tech companies really benefiting and not seeing any of the benefits going to the workers. So if AI makes something more efficient and more productive, and the shareholders and the execs are benefiting from that, the benefits should be shared and should be given to workers who, in terms of better pay, better jobs, better benefits, et cetera. And so I actually think that the investments in people and lifting the most vulnerable people is how we're going to go and really strengthen our economy. And I think that right now we just need to give our communities a chance to catch up. And also community participation is so key in all this. Decisions are being made without community participation, without people being able to give their input into these matters. And that's what's important to me, is representation and making sure the people most impacted by policies or any of these issues are at the table when we're having any of these discussions.
Yeah. You've talked a lot about immigration, both today and in other times that I've seen you. In Burlington, we have an immigration customs enforcement facility that has been definitely discussed. People have big thoughts about it on both sides. Tell me your thoughts about this particular facility, and really your purview as a congressperson versus what is state and locally controlled.
Right. So I have gone to several of these rallies. The most memorable one was, I couldn't believe how many people were out there on Christmas Eve when it was freezing cold. I don't know if you remember how cold that was. Wow. That was one of the ones I went to. Yeah. And the dedication of the people, I have to say, I have to commend folks for really being out there and being so outspoken about that. I definitely don't believe in making these investments. I also don't believe in how little accountability there is. That the fact that they're able to keep out even congressional members looking to go in to see what's happening in there. Right. We have to talk about the humanitarian side of this, where people are being held there. It's very concerning to hear about the lack of access to basic necessities, the fact that many of them are not given services or even interpretation or allowed communication with family members. Those are all things that we have to talk about, but never mind the money that goes into this that should be used for other things. That's frustrating to me. So that's one piece of it. Yeah. But for me, as an immigrant, as the only immigrant in this race, as the only immigration lawyer, I've thought about these issues for a very long time. Sure. We need to reimagine an entire new immigration system that allows for more accountability. We should not have agents being able to grab people off the streets with complete immunity. We should not be investing $75 billion into an agency that seems to focus on law-abiding people rather than focusing on the things that we need them to, like going after traffickers, going after transnational organizations, going after people who may be violent. Yeah. Like, those are the people that we would not want to be in our country. But instead, we now have a system where we're not processing applications, we're not processing visas, we're not processing asylum cases. I would argue that I want to invest more in those things, more judges, more adjudicators, more officers to process all the backlogs so that people can actually have a shot at a path to citizenship. Right.
Right now, it's just all stymied in the beginning of the process and can't get through.
I'm still in contact with many of my former colleagues who practice in immigration law, and the backlogs are... People have given up. They don't even know how long the backlog is going to be anymore. Wow. And also, as someone who just last year, I was doing some EB-1 visas. These are the genius visas. We extraordinary abilities, if you will. We essentially, as a country, would want people who are credentialed, who are published, who are top of their fields from other countries to come here to contribute to our institutions, research, businesses, you name it. Yeah. And so for a long while, if you prove that you have all these credentials, 99% acceptance rate. But now we're down to 40%.
Really?
We're literally rejecting people. And not only is that hurting our institutions, we have amazing universities here, and we have the life sciences and so many tech and so many industries that are dependent on many of these investments. Not to mention graduates who we've invested in them, allowed them to come to Massachusetts, for instance, to go to school here, and we cannot keep them here. Yeah. So we're losing all this talent. So not only are we losing the talent, we're pushing them to other countries that may not be so friendly to us. That's harmful.
Yeah.
I think that those policies need to change immediately. And on the other side too, we also need to make investments here in many. So why is it that 47% of our home care aides are foreign born? Because we don't have the people to do that work. So that means that if we don't have immigration policies that will allow many of these people to go here, that's going to be a huge gap in our needs of helping to serve our seniors, people with disabilities, et cetera.
Right.
So these are real impacts on our economy that we need to think about. And going back to talking to Republicans and Democrats should care about these issues because they're facing the same issues that we are as well.
Right. Yes. We all live in a society.
Correct.
With people. Great. What would you say is your sort of top number one issue, and how would you address that in a way that is visible here in our community?
Economic justice has always been my priority here, supporting working families. And that stems from all the things I've said to you. That's why I fought for paid family medical leave. That's why I fought for increasing minimum wage. I want to support working people so that everyone should have a fair shot at success. Everyone should have a fair shot at opportunity for stability. And those are the things that we're going to see impacting people immediately, right?
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about these issues, I would say we're very lucky here in Massachusetts. We have these laws in place. These should be available to people across the country.
Yeah.
That's why we need someone to go in there who's done this work and who's willing to work with others to push many of these things forward. But also, we have to really help the most vulnerable among us. I was talking to you about the fear. It's not just immigrants, it's people with disabilities, people from the LGBTQ community who felt so othered. My whole focus is on belonging. That is the definition of community.
Yeah.
How do we create places where people feel supported, that their family members and their community members are behind them? And that's why I've done legal aid work. That's why I focus on these issues at the state level. And that's why I continue to fight for human rights and civil rights at the federal level, because the most marginalized people need us the most right now when they're feeling not only not supported, but persecuted. When we're dealing with a government that seems to rule by fear versus bringing people in. And so when I talk about representation, I'm talking about bringing people to the table who are most impacted, who feel unheard, to uplift their voices and make sure they get a say in how things play out at all different levels of government.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
If you're looking to get involved or want to get to know us more, please go to my website, Tram for Congress, TRAM for Congress.com. Also, feel free to reach out to us by email, info@tramforcongress.com. But also, we're very active on social media.
Wonderful.
Too. So look for Team Tram. We're thrilled. We have volunteers going out in the doors. We have phone banking. We have people doing postcards. But also, we have lawn signs if people are interested in getting a lawn sign of their own. But also tell people about us. We're always open to ideas of, events or other traditions here in Burlington that we should take part in. And we'd love to hear from you.
Wonderful. Well, great. Thank you so much. Tram Nguyen, I really appreciate you coming here.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Stay tuned for more interviews with Democratic 6th District candidates and Republican ones as well here on Burlington Buzz on the Mic. Thank you for coming.